part where we sing the intro?
Yes. Da, 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 da.
Yeah. Nah, 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 nah. Come on, sing it.
No.
Na, 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 na.
You brought up the idea, sing it. Nah, 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 nah.
Welcome to the BumbleKast. I'm your host, Aleah Baker, and with me, as always, is that dude, Kyle Kraus.
I'm here. What? Are we? Wait, this isn't how it starts. What's going on?
Just read it.
You can't supplant me yet. I know. Scruffy, you traitor. I see now. You get all cozy with your priority Q&A. And then the minute my back is turned, the king is dead. Long live the Bumble Queen. Is that it? Huh? Huh?
Yes, that is it.
Welcome to the BumbleKast. I'm your host, Ian Flynn, the Bumble King, and joining me is the man who keeps the show running in 101 ways, Kyle JCRB Kraus.
I don't know. After today, I might be losing my abilities here. I don't know. Swing was a little bit precarious at the beginning, but we got it. We're here.
We have cleared some technical hurdles, yes. But what would this show be without its hiccups and slow starts? But we have a special episode today. We have a special guest, Sonic alumnus Aleah Baker. But before we properly introduce her, Kyle, how are you doing, sir?
I've been doing pretty well lately. I've gotten back into rock band. I've been doing drumming a lot, and for some reason, apparently taking a break for several years has actually improved my skills, and I don't know how that works.
You're not overthinking it, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because I spent so long playing it, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done for now. And then I came back to it, and I'm like, this isn't as hard as I remember. Let's try bumping up the difficulty a little bit. And now I'm like doing okay. I'm like, wow, I'm kind of surprised at how much I've improved. It's actually a good feeling. So, yeah, I've been having some fun with that. Been trying to figure out how I can stream it, if possible. If I can stream that game.
Possibly with a camera.
No cameras. Given its nature of using licensed music, though, that may be difficult. But we'll see.
Yeah, there is that. Unless, I don't know, you downloaded Live and Learn for us that one time we were over there. Maybe you can find stuff that the bots won't flag.
I have some ideas. I have some thoughts. So we'll see how it goes. But how are you doing, Ian?
I'm tired.
Are you tired of me?
Kyle, I had trouble getting to sleep tonight or last night.
You've been working your butt off lately, from what I hear.
I have, and I finally go to bed. I get all settled, and Midna, one of our cats, adorable, snuggly thing that she is, races into the room, leaps onto the bed, forcibly snuggles between my knees, and then adjusts, and then adjusts, and then adjusts, and then vomits right between my legs.
Perfect.
And that really threw off my circadian rhythm.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that was my evening. But
well, your morning day. Yeah, anyway.
I had to get up. I had to wake myself up because we're recording a very special BumbleKast, a long time coming. You know her as one of the main writers on the old Archie Sonic post-reboot. You know her as one of the premier character designers, the colorist for so many off-panels, the person who made Handsome Nagas truly what it is. Dubbed by the fans. Oh, what was it?
Queen of Suffering.
The Queen of Suffering. Thank you very much.
I forgot about that.
That sounds about right.
We have the one, the only, Aleah Baker.
Yep. Let's get Kureejii.
Oh, I forgot about the whole Queen of Suffering thing.
I did too. All right. Well, how you doing? How you doing, Aleah? Welcome to the show, finally.
I'm very, 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 very sorry about that.
You Canadian.
There's that too.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so
I guess there's a lot we'll be covering.
Yes, we do have quite a few questions specifically for you, dedicated to the work that you have done, which has been pretty extensive over your time with working at Archie Sonic.
Completely forgotten.
Is it? I don't think so. I don't think anybody forgets their stuff.
I don't know.
They talk about it a lot. I have a lot of questions for you. I have a huge list.
I see occasionally some stuff of mine seems to be fondly remembered, which is really cool. It's just that people attribute it to Ian.
Well,
so
you should correct them.
To be fair, people also seem to think a lot of the stuff that Tracy Yardley and Evan Stanley wrote are also by me. So yeah, it's not a personal thing.
You know, Ian just did every single thing that ever came out on the book, regardless of what any of the credits say. So,
well, Ian makes a good shield for some of the criticism, I suppose.
Of course, I also get blamed for stuff that happened 3 years before I started the book. So,
of course. Only 3 years, Ian? I thought you got blamed for like the whole run.
He's gotten blamed for stuff that happened on cartoons that came out.
Well, yes, we've been over that one. Yes, Ian, how dare you cancel Sonic Underground? You should feel terrible.
Such is my power. But we're not here to talk about me. We do that every show.
We do. We truly do.
Lee, give the fine folks at home just a quick overview. Where are you from? What do you do? Who is Aleah Baker? I mean, I know clearly, but the people.
I would hope so after this point. I'm from Toronto, and I sit around a lot.
Through no fault of your own.
That's kind of it.
We can talk about the work you've done. Talk about what characters have you designed. What characters are you responsible for?
Oh gosh. Okay. Okay. So, do I know my own run on the comics?
Your own body of work. And this also includes Mega Man. Don't forget Mega Man.
Mega Man's an interesting thing. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so Sonic. Okay, so I guess like a million years ago, I basically tried the not terribly recommended method of throwing stuff at the editors and hoping I would get someone's attention, since it worked so well for Ian.
Yeah.
So I was initially interested in just doing some coloring work. So I was basically just sending in samples of stuff I'd colored, my own art or art by friends, because they were better than I was in terms of line art, and I would just, use their work to make myself look better. But, as kind of, I guess, examples of working with other people's line art, hopefully, I guess, as a sign of versatility or something, and basically just send in examples going, hi, it's me again. I like coloring stuff. I'm familiar with these characters. I actually can tell some of the dozen of echidnas apart. Can I have a job, please?
Wow. You can tell those. You can tell the echidnas apart?
Sometimes.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing we got rid of most of them.
Into the fires of Mount Doom.
Pretty much.
So I was kind of in touch with editors being a nuisance for a while, and gosh, I guess this is around the start of Iron Dominion. I guess issue 200 before. Anyway, Ian was designing or working on starting up some of the concepts for the Iron Dominion stuff that was going to come up, and he was designing the 4 bride characters, and all but one of them had gotten rejected by the editor, And Ian was kind of just sitting there going like, well, crap, I don't know what to do about this. And I kind of butted my way in and said, ooh, let me try. And so, in contact with Mike Pellerito, kind of tried to use that to get my foot in the door a little. Can I maybe take a shot at some design work and maybe try to get my foot in the door here a little bit. So, aside from sort of the spider ride.
Endless Reach. I did Endless Reach, the circle in a bathrobe.
I did some rough sketches and submitted those. And this was like way back. We had like a very terrible scanner that kind of bleached all the pictures apart. So some of the details actually didn't get through, but the designs mostly came through intact. Tracy Yardley reworked them a little bit, but Conquering Storm pretty much showed up in, I think, the end of issue 200. So that was technically the first time anything I worked on showed up in any form, I guess, uncredited. But
they couldn't credit Conquering Storm? What the heck? They couldn't credit Conquering Storm? Come on.
Well, she was in one panel at the very end, and she didn't have a name or anything, and
so
blah, 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 blah. But anyway, so that was kind of, again, like I said, the little foot in the door sort of thing. And then I kept trying to pester my way into getting more work. And at one point,
you ended up doing a lot of off panels.
And, well, that's when, Paul Kaminsky took over. So I started harassing him instead. And eventually at a convention one day, I, seized by madness of some kind, went up to him and was like, hey, it's me, the jerk who keeps emailing you. When are you going to give me a job? And he was like, oh, yeah, I meant to, get back to you. I wanted to know if you wanted to do this off-panel strip I have. And I was like, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. No, leave me alone. I don't know what to do about this. Oh, my God. And that's kind of how I got a job.
Yay.
I kind of panicked and apologized and ran away. And was, sent the files to work on, in a week or two.
Perfect. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how you do it, people.
Much.
Just panic and run away. That'll get you a job.
Yeah.
Apparently.
I was arrogant and rude, and it was awful, and I apologized and felt bad about it. And
I'm guessing he wasn't particularly bothered.
It's not exactly how I remember it, but it's her interview. We'll just run with it.
Okay. Sure, we'll go with that. Don't try and butt in here, Ian. This isn't your interview.
And it was like a bit of a, kind of hands-on learning experience.
How did you go from writing and coloring off panels to becoming writing stories for the book?
That's the whole thing. I just kind of kept, falling and flailing and failing upwards, I guess.
Just bugging the right people at the right time?
Not even. I was coloring off-panel stuff, and then there'd be a few times where, talking with editors and stuff, and it's like, oh, it's off-panel. It's basically just making fun of all of the work we've been doing. I can do that. How about I write some of these? I love making fun of stuff.
I know. You do it to me all the time.
I know. You even endured years of it.
Decades.
Basically the trial run.
It's true.
And, so I ended up doing, I was doing coloring for off panels. I was doing lettering for off panels, which is not fun. Occasionally line art edits and inking tweaks for off panels because, sometimes the pencils wouldn't quite come through or details would be lost. And John Gray would be so distraught that, a bivalve cameo wouldn't be visible and I'd have to draw it back in for him. Or he'd forget how many thumbs a hand is supposed to have. And I'd have to fix that.
Or John Gray would just draw too many things all at once and cram everything in there, and all the detail would be lost. That was kind of all the time. Yeah.
Or he drew. He's kind
of crazy.
There was that Mama Robotnik in the bikini that I had to color.
We try to forget that around here.
Well,
but
I'm
you
glad
had to color it, so
I had to color it, and I was eating lunch.
Why were you eating?
It was because they do these in sets of 4. So by the time I got to, I was already eating. I already had my lovely sandwich that I'd made, and by the time I got to that one, I had to put it down.
Oh,
and then the worst thing was, after I endured that and put so much effort into it, when they printed it in the comic, they censored it. They actually covered her up.
It wasn't supposed to be censored? Boy, that makes it even worse.
No, they had like this whole like sign or something. I can't remember if Sonic was holding it or something, but they like covered up her torso. It's like, so the suffering I endured for the sake of the readers was for nothing.
You're welcome, people out there.
You're welcome, Sonic fandom. I mean, we posted it online after anyway, so.
Okay, that's good. So how did you go from moving on to writing actual stories in the book versus just doing off panels?
I guess in part because, between talking with Ian and talking with the editors and kind of having an idea of where stories were going and where they were being developed instead of just, sitting back and making fun of them after the fact, that kind of,
right.
Put it more on the angle of developing them going forward. And so that just kind of got to the point of, well, maybe I can actually write something that's not just, 4 panels of mockery.
I know you wrote some earlier stuff, but you were not credited as the writer, which is like, what? Why did you do that?
Well, I'm not sure. Oh,
it's like Waves of Change, I believe.
Oh, that was more. I had some input in some of the stuff. But there were a lot of cases of that where,
right.
I could say, but I could kind of say that goes all over the place. There was some weirdness with credits sometimes. There were a few cases of like previews would come out and not have my name on them.
Yeah.
Or have, again, the credits would say Ian on them instead of me.
Yeah.
Or some other stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe my name was just hard to spell.
Of course. I'm sure that's the reason.
I don't know. I can't speak to it. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But, sometimes it's just like a matter of...
Right.
Ideas get tossed around by a lot of people or redeveloped in different ways or go through a lot of iterations, and who knows what the final product is. And sometimes you have to kind of come around and it's like years after the fact and it's like, oh, how did this even get here?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, like 6 people were involved in that.
I am still disappointed that we never got a trade of Spark of Life. I believe it was even announced.
I am a little disappointed that, I can't say like I have a trade with my name on it. That would have been kind of cool. It would have been nice to actually have something with my name on the cover for once instead of, just in the background. Because then when I go to conventions, maybe people would actually be like, oh, hey, you're the writer, instead of coming up and being like, oh, hey, are you Ian's assistant?
Ian's assistant?
Which I get a lot of.
Oh, yeah.
There's been some weird ones. Like they usually just kind of assume like, oh, like you're just an artist or something. And it's like, well, no, I've done a lot of things. Or a couple times like, oh, are you a voice actor? And it's like, where did you get that idea? What on anything, on any sign, on any booklet that has my name says voice actor? Also, listen to me. I sound like a dead parrot. I don't know where. I mean, I'm sure there's a demand for dead parrots somewhere in some projects, but
she's not dead. She's just resting, pining for the fjords. Put 10,000 volts on it and boom, right through the cage.
He keeps me in a cage.
I believe that. I don't know where
Again,
he put. I don't know where he puts. I don't know where he puts that cage though. Because, oh wait, you just mean. No, okay, I get it.
I just like the direction this interview has been going. So,
Why? Go ahead,
some
Ian.
of the standout characters.
Get away from... I'm talking. I'm talking.
And I'm going to give you a chat. I'm giving you a prompt.
But I'm still... Okay.
Don't worry about me. I'm a terrible interviewer. Ian, take over.
A couple of characters that you are most identified with are Cassie and Clove, the pronghorns, egg bosses to Eggman. How did they come about?
Well, I think that was going to come up anyway. So.
We'll get to it, but don't worry. You can answer this stuff now.
Okay. Cassie and Clove, other characters Ian gets credit for all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, Ian, on creating those characters.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Get away from me. Okay. Okay, so post-reboot time, when I was talking to editor Paul Kaminsky, a lot of emphasis at the time was put on world building and basically, I guess, rebuilding, in a sense, what had been lost. There was a lot of concern, as I was told, that the fandom, was saying, oh, the world's going to be empty now. There's no characters. There's no people. There's no settings. There's no lore. There's blah, blah, blah. Everything's gone. So it was basically, we need to focus on making stuff that's compelling and, contributes to the story as a greater whole instead of just being, bodies for the sake of taking up space. So
right.
That was a general mindset, but also he told me specifically to think about some way to contribute to the whole egg boss theme, but to maybe consider a sympathetic angle. So that was basically the rough idea to start with.
Yeah.
And I'd been kind of thinking of working with a sibling angle in general for a while, just because it seemed kind of underutilized within the series.
Yeah, Sonic characters aren't frequently related to each other.
Yeah, there's that. And then even in cases where there were characters with any family, it tended to feel very underplayed or almost insignificant.
Right.
So it was basically an idea of, okay, what if I could make a pair of characters that actually had a dynamic between them that, kind of came as a pair, not necessarily as a gimmick,
Right.
but just as a starting place to work with and something that would work with the sympathetic angle. And kind of, we're looking at building up the whole egg army and egg bosses dynamic without making them all very one note or without making them a bunch of faceless goons. We wanted kind of the whole group to feel very diversified and interesting, basically. Again, as part of the overall world building focus. I kind of feel like a lot of characters in the past were just kind of thrown in there without any direction.
Mm-hmm.
Someone might have said, oh, here's a character who's going to serve this one brief plot, and then that's it. Or they're there to make this story work, or they're there to be a quick kind of flash in the pan thing.
Yeah, or they're designed to just provide conflict for an existing character.
Yeah, and then it's and then where are they supposed to go from there?
Right.
What are you going to do with them?
Right.
And it's oh, now they just take up space, and you have dozens upon dozens of characters who don't do anything, who aren't interesting, who aren't going anywhere. And it's not to say you can't try to find something to do with them, but I think it's kind of, better to sort of do that from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And basically think more, what can I do with these characters? Where are they going overall? And then another thing was, how can they play off existing characters and bounce off their dynamics and help with the other characters' growth as well as their own?
Yeah. How often did you have input on characterization for characters that you had designed?
On the characterization, actually, not a ton, really.
Yeah.
I was pretty good to do pretty much what I wanted with them.
Yeah, in terms of design, but characterization, as far as what
that's what I mean. In terms of characterization, I had a lot more freedom and leeway than I did with design, like visual design.
Okay.
Small things that would be more like serving to the actual script. Like one thing that would kind of bug me is having siblings. Like, okay, like there's some bits in the script where, like, I think very early on, especially in some stories, where like it would be like Cassia calling Clove sis in dialogue, and it's like, okay, how often do siblings actually, hey bro, this is totally not dialogue for the sake of exposition,
Right.
Like, how often do you actually call your sibling something like that?
Yeah.
And it's like, but that was something that the editor would want me to do for the sake of making sure that a reader would pick up on the fact that they're siblings.
Sure.
Because you're not allowed to, I guess, just let them infer that by their mannerisms or looks or anything, I guess. So.
Well, and I mean, some people have a hard time parsing the relations of certain characters, so you get weird pairings and romantic things that shouldn't be there, and it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, oh, definitely. And I'm not saying it's, it's just kind of a bit of a thing where it was like, that was something that would kind of dictate, here's me going, well, I wouldn't necessarily want the character to say this kind of thing, but
right,
for the sake of making the exposition present itself a certain way, that is how the editor would like it to be. But otherwise, in terms of personality, this is basically, I was able to say, here's what I was thinking, here's what their basic situation is, and here's what their basic personality types are, and that was pretty much good to go.
Okay. How often did you get to just design a character and then sort of maybe, I don't want to say push it, but like pitch them? Was that a thing that you
like
did,
or
were you mainly just were you asked to design characters, or did you design some of them just because? I guess that's the best way I can think of it, I suppose.
I wasn't really sitting there trying to go like, okay, stepping back a second. I mean, okay, ultimately the book is Sonic the Hedgehog.
Obviously, yes.
It is. You would think it's obvious, yes, but
I know.
It is designed to tie into and promote what is ultimately the video game series and its characters.
Correct.
It is not a vehicle to go, hey, here's my idea and my story and my super special character. I'm going to go make this whole playground for them over here now and do whatever I want with it.
No.
So I wasn't, just sitting there going like, here's my character, put them in the book, I want to make their story. It was more a matter of when the opportunity came up, or there was, we're thinking of doing this type of story, or we're looking at developing this type of arc or character, or like I said, after the reboot stuff, there was a lot of room for, we want to, kind of repopulate the world, so to speak. In that case, there was, a bit of, let's toss some ideas out there, but I was still kind of thinking of that in terms of how does it contribute to the greater whole, and not in terms of its own little story pockets.
Right.
How can they interact with the characters that are going to be there? How can that incorporate some of the lore or other aspects that exist in the games, so on and so forth. Now, one one that was kind of, I guess, unbidden was way back. I guess it was the Chaotix quest, was when Mighty and Ray are looking for Mighty's sister, Matilda. And at that point, I know, because Mighty and Ray were off on their own, and Ray had some alternate designs tossed around, and there had been some discussion, I guess, among the fandom, but also behind the scenes, as to whether or not he was kind of just visually looking like Tails too much. And whether some other characters were just becoming kind of inconsistent or ill-defined.
Right.
I should say ill-defined, but like poorly defined, inconsistently defined with their designs. Mm-hmm. So, while some other sketches and stuff had been tossed around, I think for at least Mighty, at that point, I was kind of like, well, this would be a decent opportunity to switch out some designs for Mighty and Ray. So that one I kind of did on my own. It was kind of like, hey, Paul, what you think? Right. And he really liked those and was really on board with them. Ray pretty much went forward as is. Mighty had a few different concepts and tweaks. And then we ended up going through quite a few with Saffron because John Gray had done a redesign for her way back around the Return to Angel Island arc, which was fine because before that point, she basically looked different every single time she showed up.
Yeah.
But after a point, it started getting kind of muddled again. Like she was getting colored differently again every time she showed up. Her hair length kept changing. A lot of the more detailed designs he threw in there kind of got thrown to the wayside and stuff. So Paul kind of wanted to, I guess, kind of solidify her design to be a little more in theme with Charmy's.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
You're kind of looking at like keeping the bomber jacket kind of angle, but maybe kind of like having it zipped up a bit so it would kind of have that zipper theme to kind of match Charmy's vest. And was kind of playing around with having like an emblem on the back of her jacket. At one point, I know I had like a purple flower design, but then it was also maybe going to be the kind of bee design that Charmy has on the front of his vest. Yeah. And I don't. So there was, I think, a backup story at some point that she had actually been penciled into with this design at a point and got edited out of last minute, which is too bad.
Yeah.
And I think she had the floral design there, but I can't remember at this point. I think it was by Stephen Butler. So it's kind of funny because like the final issue, came out and I think it's just Knuckles on his own. And originally Julie Sue and Saffron were both there, and Saffron would have had that design there, but I can't remember at this point.
Well,
but yeah, so those ones I had kind of started a little bit on my own. There was an excuse for it in story for it to happen,
right?
But I did kind of jump the gun a little bit and shove drawings in the editor's face and be like, "So hey, here's my idea."
Well, yeah, but they're redesigns that serve the characters and help them stand out a bit more. So.
Yeah, and it was kind of nice because they carried those designs into the reboot pretty much, so.
Right, exactly. Yep, and even into some other media, as we'll get to, I think.
Debatable, but...
All right. Is there anything else we need to get to, either Lee or Ian? Anything else we should talk over before we jump into the listener questions that we have for Lee? We have quite a few, so...
Yeah, I'm shocked.
We mentioned Spark of Life a little bit, but that was not your debut as a writer, but that was probably your most well-known story.
I guess. I guess we can just kind of like ramble about that later. It'll come up, right?
I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it will.
If you do want to do that, that's fine. So, go ahead.
Now we can move on, I guess, so.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on into questions from the listeners to Aleah. We have quite a few.
We've been waiting a long
Yes, they have, but that's okay. They're patient. So we appreciate your patience.
Yeah.
But the first thing to get to is a bunch of questions for people who are wondering about your what you're going to be doing in the future. So first we've got DigammaFWau asking, does Aleah Baker ever plan on writing for the IDW Sonic comic? SonicBlueRanger asks, do you have any ideas for the IDW comic? John T. asks, is Aleah Baker still working for Archie or is she working elsewhere? I adored her work on the Sonic comic and want to see more. And then SuchSavings is asking, does Aleah Baker ever plan on writing for IDW Sonic? Her stuff on Archie was great. Some fans go so far as to say she's better than you are. With Ian. Ian. It's true.
No comment. Not at all. SuchSavings.
Give me back the microphone.
Uh-oh. Anyway, so for all the folks out there who want to know if you're going to be contributing to IDW Sonic or what you're working on, otherwise, what would be what is going on?
Okay. Yeah. So first off, that's very flattering. So thank you all, and I'm really glad you all enjoyed my work so much. As much as it was, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a ton of it, I guess, but thank you. So this is going to be kind of a long and involved and personal and rambly answer, so I'm sorry for that in advance, but
that's okay.
It's kind of how it is. So when IDW was first starting up their Sonic run, I was in contact with the then editor, Joe Hughes, and David Marriott about possibly getting on board, even not necessarily in terms of writing again, but kind of looking at doing maybe, again, just coloring or something, basically what I had, kind of looked at starting with Archie. But pretty much right at that time, I had started developing some weird health issues, which I didn't know really what was going on at the time. But gotta be going with this.
It's okay. Take your time.
So I guess at this point, it's a little hard to define, as in I'm still kind of having trouble getting a clear diagnosis. But I guess a close, or most, I won't say accurate, I guess the closest way of, saying it is I have something along the lines of rheumatoid arthritis, maybe, and some other weird autoimmune stuff that started developing pretty much around the time I was looking into working for IDW, and basically started ruining all my joints.
Yeah.
So one of the main, symptoms that came with that is called dactylitis, which basically means your fingers and toes kind of inflate like giant rotten hot dogs or something, and it's really gross and painful and awkward.
I'm not laughing at that. I'm just laughing at your description.
I believe you.
Okay, good.
So, yeah. So, basically for like a year and a half, I guess, I kind of couldn't move.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I could, it was really like sporadically. Like pretty much all my joints were messed up. So like wrists, elbows, knees, everything. And especially because my fingers and toes were so bad off, I couldn't, walk or type or, hold the stylus or kind of do anything.
Right.
So I basically got back to the editors and was like, so actually, I don't know what's going on right now, but, I don't want to take on a job and be in a position where I'll be unreliable in terms of being able to hit deadlines or be able to even, do quality work or, work at all. So just like, so I'm just going to, back off for the time being and we'll see how things go.
Right.
And they were like, okay, sorry to hear that. Hopefully we'll keep in touch, blah, blah, blah.
So what?
So I've pretty much, been in treatment since.
Right.
And that's involving a lot of doctors and a lot of needles and a lot of medications. And they've probably drawn enough blood at this point to start a very ethically questionable version of Jurassic Park somewhere. Ian's laughing, but I think he'd enjoy the idea of a dinosaur hybrid me more than he wants to admit.
I don't know. He'd probably fully admit
They made her a T-Rex. Clever girl. Okay, I'm done. Ah!
I mean, as a T-Rex, my hands would probably be as useful as they are right now. So,
So how has treatment been going? I don't want to get too far into the weeds here and go into too many details, but I'm sure people are curious. Yeah.
I know it kind of is what it is at this point. It's not really, like, it can't really be avoided at this point.
Sure.
I'm going to be starting something new shortly that was hopefully going to work better. We'll see, I guess. It sounds a little intense and scary, but, you know, that's kind of the point it's at now.
Right.
I mean, it's been frustrating, like, for quite a while. I basically, couldn't really do anything. Like, I used to, I mean, you kind of know, like, you know, you were here and I was like, hey, let's go hiking up, this cliffside and let's go walking over here. And
right.
I know, I like to go swimming every single day, and then I can't do that anymore. So,
yeah.
And for, like, a lot of video games kind of became out of the question, and especially, like, I really like Splatoon, obviously, and the way you kind of hold the controller for that one, especially because, you don't have to use the motion controls, but I kind of like to, and that would kind of make my wrists balloon up and
right.
other things. So basically, it's like I got to firsthand learn how terrible daytime TV is and see how well I can play phone games with, like, one pinky if it was working, or
yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, I know, and I feel bad that I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just hoping, hopefully something.
That's basically my long reasoning about why I'm not doing any comic work really right now, or a lot of anything. I mean, I still try to go to conventions. Sometimes I usually can't make it through the whole thing because like it's like I said, it's kind of a complicated issue. I run out of energy really, really fast too. So
conventions are just exhausting in general.
Yeah, so it's entirely possible that people have come by the show and seen me, face down on the table looking like I'm dead, and that's probably just because I passed out. And I mean, sometimes that's nice because then sometimes people will feel bad and they bring me coffee and cookies and things.
Well,
or on the other hand, they kind of just poke people nearby and be like, "Is she okay? Is she dead? Do we need to get a doctor?" Or they poke me directly to make sure I'm breathing. Like at the last show I went to, that was kind of awkward.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're able to return someday. Hopefully. My fingers are crossed.
Well, aren't you fancy to be able to cross your fingers? Thank you for rubbing that in my face, you ableist snob. It's okay. I know you're my buddy.
You're welcome. I'm like, well, no matter which way I go with this, I'm just going to dig the hole deeper, so I might as well go all the way down.
Yeah, but that's how it goes, and you should know that by now.
I know. I can't argue with you. Because every time I do, I make myself look worse.
Well, yeah, and so that's basically it. I'm like super ill now, and it sucks, and so it goes.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on into some other questions. Maybe with some lighter answers.
Let's.
First up, we have our good buddy, ScruffyMatt. As always. The guy who is always here. He's always here. He says, "Hi, Aleah."
Mr. the guy who's always here.
He is. He truly is. Don't make fun of me. Or do. Whatever. I don't care. Anyway, he says, "Hi, Aleah. I was wondering if you had follow-up plans for the Spark of Life arc. Anything you can reveal to us about what you wanted to do with Nicole, Phage, Dr. Ellidy, etc.?"
Okay, let's move on to the lighter topic of the arc that involves the dead child and the grieving father.
Well, you wrote it.
Who can't move past it and projects all of his crippling issues onto his adoptive replacement daughter.
Well, you wrote it.
I know.
What am I supposed to do with this?
Okay. Let's see. So, quick aside. I didn't 100% write it. Ian had a very, very rough outline for this because he had kind of some overreaching plot stuff for the reboot.
You know what? Screw that guy. Forget him. It's yours.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what I just kind of did. I just kind of bullied my way in and shoved him over and said, "This is mine now."
Good.
You made this. I made this.
Good. As you should. As you should.
That's.
I'm not joking.
That's how it went. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because actually at that point, this was, we were developing a lot of the ideas behind that before I got really sick. So, when I was, capable of it, we used to go, we would take these regular walks down by the waterfront on the boardwalk late at night. So we would just walk for 2 hours and just kind of brainstorm ideas about characters and things. And that's specifically where I came up because Dr. Ellidy didn't have a name at that point. And I just came up with a stupid pun name because we were stuck for a while and didn't know what to do.
All else fails, puns.
Yeah. And it kind of works.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. It's not a super Sonic-y name, but whatever.
Nobody will notice.
Some names work more than others. Spark of Life was kind of interesting because, like I said, there were some very rough ideas there, and it was kind of here are some basic goals that it's supposed to accomplish, like the introduction of Phage, who is going to be involved with stuff down the road. So this is basically, here's where she first shows up, and here's how we're supposed to establish her. Wanted to get another Chaos Emerald into the mix just so, that wasn't dragging on forever. It's kind of funny because there were a lot of things that were in there or in the script, or at least in my phases of the script, that didn't get into the final version.
Mm-hmm.
And
like what?
One thing that I'm a little sad on is that there are some flashback scenes of Ellidy basically developing, the basis for the AI that would eventually become Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got various computering things around his lab and all this. And I wanted one of the systems in there to basically look like the yellow box on wheels kind of prototype Nicole thing from the Sad AM pilot episode.
Mm-hmm.
That's, Sally uses. Oh, here, I'll just pull out Nicole. She looks like this retro airport terminal thing for, checking your tickets. It's never going to work. And then, that design never showed up again. So I had that in there, even with a visual reference and stuff, all attached and all this, and it never got in the final versions of the product, the issue.
Right.
And I still don't know why. I know some of the production was a little rushed though, so I don't know. But I was a little sad just because I thought that would be a kind of fun sort of Easter egg and a bit of a kind of visual joke, in terms of how Nicole sort of progressed, in a meta way. Because we were also kind of making a bit of a reference to her sort of Preboot, I don't want to quite say origin story before her Lynx form by Tanya Del Rio, the stargazing story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was told that I could reference it, but not.
Okay.
More or less. It was like, and again, I had like very limited space to kind of cram all this stuff in there. So,
Sure.
you know, it was pretty much, how can I allude to this story and make it clear that that's what this is an allusion to without actually showing anything that looks directly like that story, or, you know, any of the actual scenes from it, or referencing it directly, and it was just like, okay, here you're giving me some fun stuff to work with here. But I really wanted to, you know, have that moment in there, so that took a lot of fun reworking, and it got in there, maybe kind of, you know, wedged in there, kind of like, you know, like salaryman in the Tokyo subway kind of crammed in, but it's there.
Sometimes that's the best you can do. Sometimes.
Sally got acorn pajamas, so that's okay, I guess.
That's good.
I know there was, like I said, with the stuff that was kind of, this isn't stuff that I wanted necessarily to work on, but that was part of the rough outlines that was supposed to be introduced to be available to be developed further down the line, was the whole digital world angle.
All right.
And I don't know what happened there, but almost none of what was in the script ended up in the story.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning something about that.
And I don't mean that in a mean way, but just because it was supposed to be kind of that we had like basically two kind of digital fields that the story was taking place in.
Mm-hmm.
One was basically kind of like inside Dr. Ellidy's like home computer network, basically like his own personal servers.
Mm-hmm.
And then the digital world was just kind of this weird, vague cloud thing that it's not like the internet necessarily. It doesn't belong to anything. And that was supposed to be, we did a bit of a thing where they were kind of, what do you call, color coded.
Mm-hmm.
So you could kind of tell where the scenes were taking place or one or the other. But the digital world was supposed to look much more fluid and weird. And there was supposed to be more stuff in it that just didn't show up. Like there was supposed to be kind of like vague, like buildings or beings or other such things, kind of not necessarily like seen that like Nicole would be interacting with, but kind of alluded to in the distance.
Right.
So you could tell there was more stuff out there going on. And then it just kind of ended up being just kind of a simple matrix grid. Kind of,
yeah. Grid design. It's like, what is this? This Sonic 3 special stage? What's going on here?
Yeah, like, yeah, it was a little simple. I don't know. So, and then obviously, like I said, that was supposed to be set up for later stories down the line, and those didn't happen. But, you know, that's basically why that was there, was as part of the kind of greater outline of stuff and the focus on world building, so it would be present to work with later. I know there was a scene with Sally when she's a kid interacting with Rosie, the nanny. And I remember some people kind of saying like the kind of flow from the present scenes to the past scenes seemed a little disconnected, and that there was some like weird spacing or something with the pages. And I was kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on. And then when I actually saw the finished product, there was a lot of dialogue missing that I had written or had been like kind of cut down and rearranged a bit.
Mm-hmm. And
it's like, oh, well, that kind of changes how it flows a little. So
curse you, editors.
I don't mean it in terms of like I'm trying to blame anyone.
No, I know. But I'm just being silly.
You know, it's kind of a matter of like author intent, I guess. Wow, that sounds snobby. It makes me sound like I know what I'm doing. Versus how you project a thing turning out versus how it actually turns out and how a reader interprets it.
Sure.
So when I see how the final, because, that's another thing, we don't necessarily see what the finished product is going to look like. It goes through so many steps and so many people.
Yeah.
So, and then it's like looking at it after, and it's like, oh, there's some stuff missing here. That changes the whole tone of this, doesn't it?
Right. And this was a story that also sort of set into motion the relationship between Sally and Nicole.
And that
they
was
continued
like,
I should say didn't set it into motion like from the beginning or anything. This was another stepping stone in their relationship, which is something that I think a lot of people appreciated.
Yeah, and that's really cool. I'm really glad that it generally seemed to be very well received. And that was something else, was like Paul was telling me, was that this isn't necessarily, the Nicole arc or whatever. He said to look at it as like something for me to focus on when I'm working on this. When I was working on this was basically to see it as the development and the focus on the relationship between Sally and Nicole.
Right.
So part of that was looking at a bit of their past in terms of the reboot too, and seeing a little bit of how they grew up together, which was only a couple like snapshots more or less, but
sure.
And to kind of touch on that, and then how a little bit too of other people see them and how that affects their development growing up and so on and so forth. And then basically I feel like a lot of relationships in the comic had a bit of a tendency to pull kind of a typical, here's a boy, here's a girl. They looked at each other. Now they're a couple. A
lot of the relationships are kind of adversarial, actually. I see, looking at like Sonic and Amy, even just as like not a rival, not a rivalry, but it sort of is like where Sonic isn't interested or whatever, things like that, or where they fall into certain tropes, or like I don't know.
Well,
Knuckles and Rouge, who were never officially together, but they're kind of rivals.
That's kind of the ones that are on Sega's end, which are
right, and those are very tropey. Yeah,
and I mean more in terms of ones where you're supposed to look at, okay, here's an established relationship. They're actually considering each other a significant other, but then it's like, well, how did they get to this point?
Okay, yeah.
They met each other.
I see what you mean.
They locked eyes once, and they're a couple now.
Okay, yeah.
Or they have one moment of, something touching, and hearts are drawn all over the panel, and they're a couple now. And it's like, or even if it's like, you kind of come into it after the fact, it's like, oh, who's this brand new character? This is my boyfriend. Well, how did you get there? We're not telling you.
You gotta have that slow burn. Come on, guys. Don't you know anything?
Well, I'm not even saying that necessarily.
I know.
But the thing was that you have a lot of these relationships where you're more or less just told the characters are in a relationship.
Yeah. Yep.
Without seeing any development or without getting any real idea of why they were together or seeing any examples of them actually showing any kind of, I guess, interaction between each other.
Sure.
That wasn't just the tropey "I'm in love with you" kind of thing. And it's like, well, what do you guys do with each other that shows you're a couple? What are your hobbies? What do you do on your downtime? Do you like, how do you interact aside from declaring that you're in love with each other when you're on panel? There's not much to that.
Right.
Do you not to talk about their feelings, as sappy as that sounds, or their concerns, or other people, or whatever? It's just, I don't know, there was a lot of relationship drama and triangles for the sake of triangles and drama for the sake of drama, and a lot of one-sidedness where you had one character say, oh, I'm so in love with so-and-so.
Right.
They don't even notice me. They are completely oblivious. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not a relationship.
No, it's not realistic. And I mean,
so I think a lot of
we're talking about talking animal comics, but still, you got to have some level of believability and
realism applies
and
to
realism,
different
right?
aspects and angles. So basically, I think there's kind of a point where you have to show, how people are friends first,
right?
And that I think a relationship should be an extension of that.
I agree.
And that a romance should be basically an extension of that. So it's basically a matter of, how do these two, in the case of like Sally and Nicole, again, interact with each other, and especially in a situation where Nicole is facing a lot of adversity and is kind of feeling pretty down on herself when she's still kind of, in a lot of senses, still trying to kind of, figure herself out.
Mm-hmm.
How does Sally support her through that, or,
right,
that kind of thing. So, and at the same time, I didn't want them only interacting with each other. That was something I would try to make kind of a point of when I was writing anything, was to at least try to have characters interacting with as many people or other characters as I could, just so there weren't a lot of cases of, oh, this character only ever interacts with this character. This character is always sequestered off with this character. So, Tails was always part of the plot outline for Spark of Life, like before I was even on it.
Mm-hmm.
But Big the Cat wasn't. And I thought that would be something a bit different, to have him basically interact with primarily Sally.
Yeah.
And then a tiny bit with Nicole and stuff, but mostly, and just give him a little bit of something to do to put him in a bit of a different scenario instead of where he usually is. So,
right.
I still would kind of make a point of having Tails talks with Ellidy a bit. He has sometimes with Big, sometimes with Sally. Nicole has a lot of stuff, even if it's not necessarily with direct dialogue, but a lot of her character interaction was between Phage and Ellidy because they reflect directly on her. Basically, so it just wasn't, it's about
just the two of them,
Nicole and Sally, but just the two of them, and then they're kind of stuck only bouncing off each other.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily give your characters a lot of variables to work with.
Yeah. Yep.
But beyond the arc, one thing basically was that the idea was to kind of introduce Ellidy as someone at a very low point, and this was basically to give him somewhere to grow out of and kind of a stepping stone to start kind of living his life in a more positive manner again. So he was slated to show up in an art or a story that Ian had been working on after the fact, but that's basically just the general idea of where he would have gone from that. But in terms of specifics, nothing too concrete, I guess, to come from that after, if that makes sense. Like there were some ideas in the works, but
right.
I didn't have any huge grand directions necessarily.
Sure.
Part of that too is also to kind of keep things flexible, because you also never know when,
things always change.
An editor might, say, hey, we're doing a big crossover thing,
or hey, there's no more comic anymore.
Hey, there's no more comic anymore.
Yeah.
Submit these scripts and oops, they're not getting published. I'm sorry.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry for being long-winded.
That's okay. Let's go ahead and get into another question from NiTROACTiVE this time. Do you suppose you can now show us the new designs you created for Hershey the Cat and Saffron Bee you had prepared before the Archie Sonic reboot that you talked about on the Bumbleking Comics forums over 3 years ago? It's a long sentence.
Well, over 3 years ago. I mean, I guess it is technically still over 3 years ago.
It's nearly 4, yeah.
I'm pretty sure my answer now is probably the same as what it was then, which is that those are probably on a hard drive somewhere I don't know where.
Buried somewhere.
I gave what I thought was a pretty detailed description of what they would have looked like way back when.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure some fan artists might have done their interpretations of Saffron based on
the
descriptions, but I don't know. I've gone. I mean, it's been a long time, and I am not terribly organized when it comes to files. I was actually helping John Gray find some old files that we'd collaborated on a few weeks ago. Some of the file names on those, they're not appropriate to repeat here. I don't know. I don't even know if he named those or if I named those.
One .jpeg, one final.jpeg, one final for real.jpeg.
No, you're being cute.
Keyboard. Oh, just keyboard mashing?
Keyboard mashing, boo boo kitty, and then some very inappropriate language.
Okay.
The handsome Naugus one might have been in there somewhere. That thing will never go away. That thing will not die. Anyway, I'm sorry. Those designs are, I don't know where they are.
They're buried.
I gave some descriptions of them, and that's what I've got. I'm sorry.
They're buried to time. All right, next question comes from Connell T. What was the conception behind the making of Egg Boss Abyss the Squid? A shame we never got to know more of her, but hoping to know more about how she came to be.
So, okay, this one wasn't fully my work. This was in part one of Ian's concepts that got reworked a few times. And I hope he doesn't hate me for saying this, but his initial concept, I thought looked too much like a bird and looked way too similar to Neff, the vulture egg boss. He's giving me a look. Are
you trying to be nice and not saying it looked terrible?
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I did not say that. Okay. You said that.
Well, yeah, I did.
You said those words.
I didn't, but I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Well, regardless. But like he and Vin Lovato, our other editor, had done some back and forth on those for a bit. Uh-huh. And me being a jerk was kind of like, well, here's my idea, guys. And I was kind of just going like, what if it's more along this line kind of thing? And then Vin kind of went with it, except he's like, I don't like the color scheme. This sucks. Change it.
How dare you?
He didn't actually say that, but God, she went through so many color schemes. And then Vin was like, I'm going to go with this like teal and purple, which kind of, I don't know. It kind of ends up looking like I like teal and purple, like on everything. And I'm not the one who keeps picking that. Like I kind of,
it's a good combination.
It's a nice combination. It's also very 90s. I'm a teenage girl painting my room.
That's okay.
But at one point, like I was kind of thinking like she'd be kind of like very pale, kind of whitish, with like the base color kind of just being seen as a shadow. Mm-hmm. So, like, still be a base color of some kind, but the highlights would be pretty much shining white, and just you'd only see the colors in the darker shades. So I was kind of looking at kind of like a pinky tone at first, and I was pretty much told that, no, she's going to be a villain. She can't be pink.
What? Why not? Like, why can't you have a pink villain?
That's what I thought. I'm like, why not? And, but yeah, so I'm pretty sure there were at least a dozen different color schemes for her and a couple little tweaks and stuff.
It reminds me of the pink Darth Vader mod for Star Wars Battlefront, because someone at EA said nobody wants a pink Darth Vader. They're like, oh yeah, it's like, come on, you can have a pink villain.
Pink. Then it was like a very pale whitish pink. So when we got around to way down the line, but made Dive the Lemming, I purposely made him very, very pink and magenta. I mean, he's barely a villain, but
it's fine.
That was on purpose, and it happened.
Good.
I got away with that. No one cared that he was very pink, but
good.
Oh well, that's kind of another story. But I know early on, Abyss was like other concepts for her was kind of thinking she was going to be like a much bigger, beefier, I think, kind of, or just like I don't know, more physically imposing character, and then eventually she kind of became just kind of like this smaller, more kind of sprightly jerk. Kind of this like little smart ass.
Right.
I don't know. I think in terms of like for the variety amongst the egg bosses, it kind of worked.
Yeah.
For what she is. So there's that.
All right.
I don't know. I wonder if we still have the other concept art for her around somewhere.
It's buried along with Hershey and Saffron.
Well, it wasn't as old as those.
Oh, okay.
And also, it wasn't my files, so it's probably not named, Nonsense Fish Sticks 125.
That's not confusing at all.
Nothing's confusing.
Okay, good.
Anyway.
Next question from K.A. Actually, this is multiple questions, kind of all bunched together. Did you picture the aquatic characters to have any unique abilities or quirks? What are Chloe's hobbies, and what did you keep in mind when designing characters?
Okay, let's answer all of those at once. No. Okay.
No, we can go through them. I just read them all. So go ahead.
Okay. Picture the aquatic characters to have unique abilities or quirks.
Any more than they were given in the books, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I guess in terms of like the individual species types, they would have, whatever traits to a degree.
Sure.
Like, I don't know, if we had some kind of like electric eel type character, even if you get, a little cartoony with the physics, could work in some kind of electrical abilities or whatever.
Sure.
But in general, that was because, again, when we were looking at the world building stuff, there was a lot of back and forth because we were kind of like looking at, like, do we want to kind of make them sort of like, okay, beforehand, the closest thing to aquatic characters were the 40 Fathom Freedom Fighters.
Right. Which
were basically, here's a cartoon dolphin and a clam and...
essentially, yes.
A kind of squiggly cloud with bits hanging off it that we're calling a jellyfin.
They weren't quite in line with the designs we expect from Sonic characters. At least, definitely not what we expect now. Kinda, but...
So, basically, we were going over kind of back and forth a bit with Paul Kaminsky was, if we would do kind of like a pseudo mermaid, mer-people type design.
Right.
Where they would have kind of like just kind of fluke body and then arms maybe, or this or that or whatever. And Paul wanted them to kind of have more of the Sonic standard, I guess, body type.
Mm-hmm.
So that we would have more versatility in terms of storytelling. So if we wanted to use the characters on land or in whatever situation, that just wouldn't be an issue, I guess.
Right.
So that's how we kind of came to that sort of standard. And then we just figured, don't make it like too overly complicated. Can they breathe air? Sure. Why not? Kind of figured like, they would prefer to be in the water. I guess it would be like uncomfortable if they're out on land for too long or something, but
sure. That makes sense.
They only go so far in terms of realism with Sonic characters.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, look at Charmy. He's got like a little, mammal type nose. He's got 4 limbs.
He's way bigger than a real bee.
Oh my God, you're right.
He's enormous.
I never noticed.
He's enormous.
And he talks.
He talks. He has normal-ish looking eyes compared to the other characters.
Okay, I don't know what you
He doesn't
Fine
have
as normal eyes, Kyle.
He doesn't have
but
compound eyes. I mean, in relation to the other characters, he has eyes like the
he has
other
compound
characters.
eyes. In
He does
terms
not.
Of two
He does not have.
stuck together.
Well,
He has a
yes, he has a single eye with two. He has a single eyeball with two pupils in it. Yes, like every other character.
Have you ever noticed that Sonic doesn't have two separate eyes? Movie design notwithstanding. We're not talking about
What?
movie design.
What?
Anyway.
You're blowing my mind here. My mind is officially exploded all over. It's a good thing I don't need. It's a good thing I don't need it. Anyway, what are Clove's hobbies?
Who? What? Sonic eyeballs? What? Oh, Clove.
Yeah.
So I figure she likes reading a lot.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
What does she
But
read?
books, trashy magazine. No, just books.
Books. Who reads books?
People.
It's disgusting.
And I kind of figure she likes flower pressing, like collecting flowers and smushing them in the pages of those books.
But you can't read them anymore when you put the flowers in it. What the heck? That's okay. It's fine.
She's a multitasker.
It's whatever she wants to do.
But travel around, find some distinct or unusual looking flower, smush it in the book.
Perfect.
That's what she do.
Okay, good. And what did you keep in mind when designing characters?
Eventually, kind of turned into a matter of what is likely to get rejected by the editor.
Right.
That sounds very kind of callous and pessimistic, but
Oh, it's understandable. It's
I mean,
realistic.
okay, to a point, there's kind of, I guess, a point of what appeals to me personally. Sure. What do I like, and what does someone in that position think is going to have more mass appeal?
Mm-hmm.
Or here's a big one that I think a lot of people don't consider is what is going to be less of a hassle for the art team.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty.
And so I was
common.
often told basically, don't go too complex with color schemes or details.
Yeah.
No overly complicated patterns. Actually, that was the thing. With the Saffron design, I was kind of thinking at one point because it was kind of like a retro-y design. So I was kind of thinking of giving her kind of polka dots on her dress, and that's something pretty simple. That's nothing you don't really have to line it up with anything, or it's not like a plaid or something where it has to follow contours of fabric or whatnot.
Sure.
But is the artist going to have to draw a bunch of circles and the colorist is going to have to fill all these in, or is the colorist going to have to know to add these dots? And then are they going to have to do it on every single friggin' panel that this character shows up in?
Right.
And
just makes things more complicated.
Yeah.
They necessarily need to be.
Have to be consistent? Yeah. Do they have to be a consistent size?
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's another kind of. It's not necessarily the end of the world. I mean, some characters do have pretty detailed designs, but look at Tikal's skirt, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me what that looks like off the top of your head?
I know it's white, green, and but the details, no, not really.
They said don't do gradients in terms of colors.
Oh yeah, no, that's bad.
So kind of stayed away from stuff like that. And then it's just it's basically just stuff like that, and try to kind of keep it with the Sonic aesthetic. And then even then there'd be cases of, okay, well here's this idea for this character, and then some people or whoever would be going over and saying, well, I had this idea, or I don't think this looks very balanced, or let's go through 13 different color schemes.
Right.
When the Freedom Fighters were being redesigned for the reboot, there was a lot of different input going around. And that got pretty interesting. It's kind of funny because I think some of the ideas that were tossed in there wouldn't have gone through in the end, Antoine's proposed shorts.
Nice.
It's a kind of, I guess, general rule now about how male characters are supposed to
be pantsless.
More or less, I guess.
No pants.
And when we were, there's various input being submitted for Antoine's redesign. And at a point, there were some very form-fitting shorts for Antoine that I was not fond of, and they didn't come to pass in the end, but
it's probably a good thing.
They were there at a point. They weren't there at the start, and then they appeared one day, and then they didn't happen. But it was kind of funny because at that point, I think some people might have seen that there was like an early cover where he had some markings around his eyes, and he had a different like snout design.
Mm-hmm.
And then the cover, and then the final like design was tweaked from that, and those were gone too. So I don't know when exactly the final changes / approvals happened, but I guess they were very, very late game, and at least the shorts weren't part of them.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, I'm not saying these are like hard and fast rules. It was just kind of some stuff that was, to me. So when I was designing stuff going, here's what we're looking at for a character design in general, or here's kind of what we're thinking. Here's stuff to generally keep in mind. That's not like necessarily an absolute rule, but, well, maybe in some regards it might be, but
right.
Try to keep these things in mind, and then someone else might turn around and say, well, here's my version, and here's all the polka dots and plaid and gradients, and I don't know, someone might approve it.
Sure.
Just because, you never know.
All right, let's go on to the next question, shall we?
Okay.
This one comes from PC the Unicorn. Were you setting up a possible blues / Quake Woman romance in the Archie Mega Man comics?
That was not up to me, so personally, no.
Why not? I mean, I'm joking.
Though, okay, because in part, Quake Woman and her creator and some other people were basically introduced because classic Mega Man is a sausage fest.
Correct.
Everyone, it's been said. It's all, everyone knows.
Correct.
It kind of goes without saying, but just so it wasn't, here's girl counterpart to Mega Man. She's a love interest.
Yeah, which of course some people immediately latched onto as.
Oh, some people were mad at the
together.
character for existing and being a love interest when she wasn't, and it's like,
no.
Thanks, guys. Whatever.
Of course.
But I did kind of submit some scripts and pitches and stuff for Mega Man, but I wasn't as directly involved with that comics production, and I think they had she and like Blue Zetas had an interesting dynamic together, and that was worth exploring, but I was not involved in anything really. I mean, the closest thing I actually got to a published story would be that weird one-off, what was it, the battle books, I think they were called.
Oh yeah,
from the crossover.
Yep.
Which was, were they like 7 pages, I think?
Yeah.
Basically, Paul Kaminsky contacted me with that, and it's like, so we're doing like, these like side story spin-offs, and I've got this one slated for Knuckles versus Breakman, and I was wondering if you wanted to write it, and it's like, yes! Gimme! And it's like, you won't let me like write Sonic and anything. Give me these guys at least.
That's a good one, though. I like that one. That was my favorite of those stories.
Thank you very much. I have like only really seen a physical copy of it like twice.
Well, you signed mine, so.
That's probably what.
So thank you.
Someone brought a copy of like a special edition to sign once, and I was kind of staring at it being like, what is this thing?
This is real? This actually happened?
No, it's like, what are you handing to me? I don't sign things that I didn't work on. Oh, wait a second. I did work on this. It was kind of, because like Paul was like, so these are like the side stories we're doing. They're 7 pages long, and he's like, basically it just has to be a big fight scene, okay? It doesn't have to be deep or dramatic or mean anything. They just have to like wail on each other for 7 pages, and this is who has to win in the end. And it's like, oh, okay, I can do that.
Yeah. And it was good.
Thank you.
And it was good.
I'm glad I was kind of, I guess picked for that one. So even if it was like a side book on a side spin-off crossover thing.
That's fine.
It's kind of a weird over there.
It's just a way. It's just a way to get more mileage out of that crossover. Got to do it.
It was that. Okay.
Next question comes from Homira the Best. What was the main inspiration for the Pronghorn sisters? In your mind, what was the ideal ending for them? Also, this is a bit spoilery, but did they grow up as orphans or at the very least poor?
Okay, so we're getting into, I guess, like unpublished ideas and
right,
random backstory stuff and blah blah. So,
insert standard disclaimer about Lost Hedgehog tales here.
Yeah, there's that.
Uh-huh.
And, kind of take things with a grain of salt because nothing was like obviously like set in stone or
sure.
It wasn't like here was this script sitting in a backlog somewhere waiting to be penciled.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike other ones. But anyway, I had wanted to do like a sibling dynamic with something and was more or less told we need a new egg boss. Go for sympathetic angle. But I don't even remember how I came across the idea for pronghorns because they weren't pronghorns to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at some. Oh, that was one thing. At one point, they were almost badgers.
That could have been interesting.
Which turned out to be really, really fortuitous that I went against that in the end because at that point this is like way back. We knew that Styx was going to be a thing. For Sonic Boom.
Right, uh-huh.
As in, we knew her name, and we knew her general concept and personality, but we didn't know what type of animal she was or what her design was.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I'd made characters that were badgers, and then Sonic Team, or, Sonic Boom was like, hey, here's a badger character, and they looked really mismatched, that could have been a bit messy.
Yeah. I suppose.
I mean, I'm not saying it would have been a case of like Mighty the armadillo versus Arlo the pill bug armadillo thing.
Right, yeah.
Because I think the design sensibilities would have been a little closer. I can't remember now where exactly I came up because I remember I was looking at some different ideas and I was kind of thinking something along some type of like deer type critter.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out about pronghorns, but I was like, how have I never heard about this creature before now? This is like the second fastest land animal. That sounds like a very good fit for the Sonic series.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And just kind of visually, they seemed like something that could kind of lend itself to interesting visuals. Like something I thought was kind of neat was that the males and females can both grow horns. And the actual kind of pronged horn aspect is more typically male exclusive, but can show up on the females of the species as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that would be kind of neat to have Clove have that kind of a bit more like visually distinctive and to kind of, I thought would kind of give like a bit of an air of like leadership and maturity to her. Versus Cassia, who just have like the kind of smaller little nub horns.
Right.
And not that I really got around to doing it, but I figured if we saw more guys of the species, they would have kind of more pronounced horns, but still kind of similar. I mean, we did see guys, but just, those are kind of like background mooks more.
Sure. Right.
But yeah, so basically, there's that in terms of the visuals and, went through a bunch of different rough designs. then came closer to the finals, and then went over them with Paul for a bit. He brought Evan Stanley on to do some final tweaks. And she like did the really cool like kind of foot and leg design on Clove.
Yeah, that did look cool.
Was an aspect I really loved.
Mm-hmm.
So, went through a few more rounds of this and that and blah blah blah, and came out with the final designs there. So for like backstory aspects and stuff, so what was it like? Were they orphans? Not initially, but yes. Or they were orphaned, I guess, at a point. So, not that this is like 100% solid, but I did have like some rough ideas down. Basically, when making characters, especially like the post-reboot stuff, we were trying to kind of, like I said, kind of have a rough idea of what the characters were and where they were going and stuff, so that no one was just kind of floating around in an abyss, and then things could be properly foreshadowed if needed and developed, as opposed to just, trying to cram retcon ideas into them.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, well, this isn't all like, so you need some of this to be flexible just in case. So it wasn't like 100% down, but so basic idea for them was that they were kind of in, I don't want to say it like necessarily poor, but I guess kind of a minimalistic society. Kind of nomadic and very, I want to say low tech, but I just want to preface this by saying that I don't mean to make comparisons to other societies as they've been portrayed in the book. When I say low tech or semi-isolated or anything, I don't mean by force, doesn't mean, oh, they shun all tech and have no idea what a TV is and blah, 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 nothing like that. Just that in terms of like, even nowadays there are, societies and small villages and stuff where obviously our technology is available worldwide, but it's not necessarily widespread in certain areas. Some areas are more remote than others. Yeah,
and there are areas of the world where certain things just aren't used or don't exist or stuff like that. Yeah, so kind of think like sort of like a kind of like nomadic sort of like Bedouin type lifestyle, I guess. Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking that that initially kind of like I had like rough names and designs for their parents. Don't ask me where they were. They were like pen doodles in a notebook somewhere. I don't know. But I had like their mother as Piper and their father as Sage to kind of continue the sort of plant herbal theme with their names.
Yeah.
And kind of figured that like, in terms of like kind of nomadic traveling and stuff, they would like go like when they were young kids, they would go with their father, kind of on like these trips to like visit different places or like maybe shops or small towns or things. And, Chloe would be able to kind of pick up new books or new to her, like, secondhand books or whatever. And, Cassia might get to like play whatever old cabinet style video game might be sitting around or something. So they'd have like some exposure to other things.
Sure.
But still, in their own lives, it would be kind of minimalistic and such. But I figured that eventually their mother, who I kind of figured was some kind of like council leadership role within their society of whatever it was, gradually sickened and passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually, when Cassia started showing signs of illness that looked like they might have been similar, their father left to try to find help or a cure or insight or something to help her, and never came back.
Well, what a jerk.
Because I'm a cheerful person.
That's okay.
So basically, they were eventually kind of stuck on their own, and Clove was left to take care of her sister.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, I got these next two questions here. I'm going to essentially combine them because I think you pretty much already covered them, or as much as you can, at least. So, okay. But I'm going to read them out just so we have them. First one comes from Sonic Legacy. Where would Clove and Cassia's story had gone had the Archie comics not been canceled? And from Mark Zilla, would Cassia and Clove eventually turn good?
Well, that implies they were ever really bad. Okay. Okay, so very broad strokes. Because, at this point, I guess I might as well.
Sure.
So where we left off, more or less, in the comic was that Clove knew that Cassia was now in a state of more or less dependency and was not actually getting better, but was pretty much hiding that and lying to her, kind of cruel to be kind kind of thing. She was stuck.
Sure, yeah.
So, basically, in Clove's case, she wouldn't want to be in that position, obviously, and she wouldn't want to be lying to her, but at the same time, she wouldn't want Cassia to feel worse about herself and to feel like she's the cause of their current situation or anything else. So when the truth would finally get out, because of course it would, how we had a few different methods about that. So it would have happened one way or another. The idea would be kind of that Cassia would kind of be in a bit of denial about not really being any better, and obviously be really, really pissed off. And
understandably.
Basically, despite Clove's begging otherwise, would just take off on her own. In part, just, out of anger, just getting out of there for a bit. But in part, out of spite and just kind of I can't actually still be that sick. I don't need any treatment or anything. I'll go off on my own and be fine. Except she wouldn't be. But the idea would be that they were separated for a bit. Cassia wouldn't come back, and Clove, with Eggman not making it any better, would basically come to believe she had run off and passed away, more or less, and just completely lose all hope and just completely fall apart on herself. And figure at that point she has nothing left to go for at this point but to, continue acting as a leader to the few people she has left under her and just kind of blindly throw herself into that role.
Yeah.
So in the kind of very detached, cold, uncaring way. Whereas Cassia would have been found one way or another by some compassionate forces. We had kind of alternate takes on this, whether it would have been through the freedom fighters or through Gunn or through both or whatever, and go through some other, character development on her own while receiving treatment, actual treatment, something that's actually designed to help her with the hero side, possibly through, Rotor and Tails, or possibly through Dr. Ellidy, or possibly through Shadow, or possibly through a combination. We had kind of a few different avenues to look at this. And, like I said, there's some flexibility to kind of see how it could serve multiple characters at a time instead of just one character's narrative. But so part of that too would be like on the flip side, because having Cassia, I thought, served as a neat kind of sounding board and counterpoint to Bunny as a character.
Yeah.
So having them interact was kind of something that would have been good to get more mileage out of, I thought. And then on Clove's side, we kind of had a bit of a setup where she and Sally had interacted, and Sally had been given the impression that, Clove was someone who didn't really want to work for Eggman, who was willing to subvert him if she could, who wasn't really going to cause them much trouble, and would have relayed this to Lupe, whose territory Clove was more or less next to. And then that would have kind of come to a bit of a head where, through some other conflict or whatever, Lupe would have been in a situation where, her people are facing Clove's army, and she's expecting Clove to, be more compassionate or more, like how Sally described her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And instead just finds this ragged, cold mess of a shell of a person who is nothing like she's expecting.
Right. Yeah.
So, they all would have kind of hit some very low points because I'm mean like that. But
well, you gotta offset the highs with the lows. It's good story. It's good storytelling.
And eventually, I don't know how much Ian would get into that with his stuff eventually, so I'm not going to go into all that. But through some planned stuff with that would have been some of Roder's storyline developing, there would have been eventually the realization for Clove and, at least just knowing that Cassia was okay.
Yeah.
Would kind of get her back on track, and she would eventually have an out for her and the, troops serving under her.
Yeah.
And basically get in a better position from there. And even if it wasn't eventual, not like... I would think they would have a reconciliation eventually, but at least just knowing that, Cassia was okay would,
You got to build up to it.
Yeah, kind of get her head back together, so...
Yeah. Yep.
So that's a very long-winded way of saying eventually things would have worked out for them. I'm not super mean. I wasn't going to... I know everyone expected me to just, nuke one of them for the sake of it, but I wasn't going to. I like to think that...
Instead, that happened to the whole book.
Thanks, Kyle.
It's not my fault.
I was going to say something about how I'd like to think that Sonic stories should eventually have a hopeful tone of some kind, but no, you can go ahead and just do that. Fine. Whatever. Whatever.
They better do that at some point. Ian's the one who controls that.
Ian controls everything.
It's true, he does. Have you seen what the people say about him on Twitter? He has control over everything.
Everything.
Uh-huh. Obviously.
Retroactively.
I'm still salty about him canceling Sonic Underground.
I know.
That's the worst thing he could have done. Jerk.
I'm mad at the French dub voices he assigned for Sonic X.
Oh, yeah. Terrible.
SBO sounded like a bike horn.
A bike horn? Now I gotta find this. Not right now, but after we're done here, I gotta find this. All right, are we ready to move on to the last question, which is more like a comment rather than a question, but whatever.
We're almost done?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Everyone's sick of me already?
No, we are not.
I'm not?
I'm not. I'm glad you're not sick of yourself.
I am actually kind of in pain.
I know. That's why we're at the last one. Here we go. From Lee H. It would be nice if Aleah Baker got a special thanks credit in Sonic Mania Plus for Ray's new shoes.
Oh, because that's been officially proven to have been my contribution, right? And not just a coincidence.
They look very, very, very similar. I don't know.
Well, they kind of do, and Tyson Hess did once draw those designs of mine.
Yup. Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of nice to think, though, that maybe they did take some inspiration for that design. Maybe.
I hope so.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all our questions from the lovely listeners of this show. Thank you all for submitting your questions. And thank you, Aleah, for joining us on this episode.
I am so sorry for...
For what now? What are you sorry for now?
Oh, I'm trying to explain it, but you keep interrupting me.
You're welcome.
But, no, shut up. I'm trying to be nice and apologize.
And I'm trying to tell you don't have to apologize, but fine, whatever.
I'm talking. Shut up.
Okay.
Shut the face. No, but I mean, it was a very long time, and it took forever, and I feel very bad about that, but, I have no endurance nowadays, and I get tired really easily, and I know that sounds like a very lazy cop-out, but seriously, come by a convention and assuming I'm even there because I'm not asleep at home, there really is a very good chance that I am face planting on a table. So
Right.
I'm really sorry that it took me this long to appear on the show. Aside from, being in the background of the video game streams laughing at you guys.
No, it's perfectly fine.
I would join in on the games more often, but it's sometimes hard to, play video games.
That's okay.
Too.
I had a good time playing Splatoon and you killing me and us getting killed, us getting destroyed.
I never get destroyed. I'm the best.
I know.
That's a lie.
You're better than I am. I'm terrible at that game.
Yeah.
As we have video proof of.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing now that at least you guys have like a chance against me in Smash Brothers now.
I suppose. We'll find out, won't we? At some point. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Finally, it's not your fault. Don't say you're sorry.
Okay.
But still, I'm glad you could be here with us. So thank you. And thank you for answering all the people's questions. And hopefully we'll be able to have you on again at some point. Go ahead.
I said, I hope I did an okay job and didn't just ramble on and forget the actual point. And
Nope. We got you steered back on track. It's all good.
I don't trust myself to do anything.
Okay. Well, do you trust yourself to let Ian back on? So we can wrap up this episode.
I guess.
Or do you just want to answer the Q&A?
Oh, you want me to answer Ian's?
Let me out! Let me out! Give me back the mic!
I can answer for Ian.
You can answer for Ian? You can speak for Ian? Good, I'm glad.
I will gnaw my leg off to get out of this shackle.
I mean, I remember all kinds of weird details from Archie that he doesn't. One time...
Hang on. Actually, this first question we have is not even related to the comic, really, so we could talk about that.
I was gonna talk about how this one time there was like a dead animal stuck in the ducts in the Archie Sonic office.
Really?
Take up the place.
Did they figure out what it was?
I think wasn't it like, I don't know, it was a mouse or something, but I think it was a while before they found out what it was. But it was just like, wow, something in this particular corner of the office just reeks like death. It's like, well, there's a reason for that. Anyway, that's my behind the scenes info.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, since you're here, let's go ahead and answer the first question from ScruffyMatt.
Uh-oh.
He says, "Howdy, fellas. How's things?" That's not the actual question.
Oh, because things are, I'm in pain.
He says, "Just a short and quick one this time, as I think it's about time to settle this debate once and for all. Which is the correct pronunciation, Hydro City or Hydrocity?"
Hydro City.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. Hydrocity, no. What the heck is that?
It's not a word.
No, it's not. It's Hydro City. It's a compound word of hydro and city. It's a water town. Come on.
Yes. That is exactly what it is.
Is Ian actually able to even listen to this?
He can listen.
Is he listening?
He can't say anything. This is like a kind of, I have no mouth and I'm a scream.
Is this what we're doing now? Are we actually doing this?
Why not? What's he gonna do?
Ian, shout your answer across the room. Ian, what do you think? Is it Hydro City or Hydrocity? Uh-oh. He's not listening to me. He's not listening anymore.
I might have to go so I can, I don't know.
It's okay. It's fine. You go
I need some Canadian healthcare drugs. Excuse me.
Okay, have fun. You can go and recuperate. Let's get Ian back on here.
Okay, it's Hydro City.
Yes, correct.
All right, here you go.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
How quickly I'm forgotten, Kyle.
Welcome back, Ian. Welcome back to your show. No, not anymore. Now it's the Lee and Kyle show. That's what we're going to do from now on.
Well, I mean, she is right. It is Hydro City, so I can't really argue.
Okay, good. We're jumping right into the priority Q&A then, huh? Screw it. Here we go.
Yeah, I noticed. Without me. Thanks.
You're welcome. Here we go. Andrew D. Here's one from Andrew D. How's Mecha Sonic from Sonic 3 and Knuckles related to the robotic Sonics in this new reboot? What about the robotic Sonic in the Egg Carrier and Sonic Adventure DX?
I figure they're all just part of a line of robot Sonics. You know, Metal Sonic is the premier model, but there are variants which include Mecha and whatever the one is in the Egg Carrier. I've seen arguments made that it's Mecha, that it's some variation on Silver Sonic or whatnot, but I don't think there's like a dedicated lineage like there was in the old comics. It's just kind of like more background minutia, especially since we haven't seen an active non-Metal Sonic being very generous since SA1.
Yeah, right. All right, next one comes from Koopaling Crew. Is there any way us as fans can let Archie or Capcom know we'd like to see the Archie Mega Man run continue, such as buying volumes or messaging in a certain way on certain media sites?
Aside from emailing Archie directly, writing them letters, contacting them on Twitter, and I would say buy backlog stuff, but I don't think that's for sale anymore. I think all the books you find on like Amazon or whatnot are used copies or independent shippers stock. So I don't think Archie really sees a dime of that. But just, let them know on social media, and not just Archie, but Capcom as well. I'm really, really impressed with the amount of enduring love for that series. Thankful, too. So I guess just keep hammering them on social media and through the regular correspondence. I don't know if it'll ever bear fruit, but it certainly can't hurt.
Yep. All right, let's move into the standard Q&A. Don't forget, you can ask us questions on Twitter at BumbleKast. You can also email us at BumbleKast@yahoo.com. You can leave your questions down in the YouTube comments if you're watching this on YouTube, or you can, what's the other method that I'm completely blanking on now?
Patreon comments.
You can do it, on Patreon. Yep. Or you can also leave your questions in the Discord in the Q&A channel. All right. So first standard Q&A comes from Knucklescarf UK. I don't know if this has been asked before or not, but was it ever confirmed that Archie Breezy is a robot or not?
No, we never confirmed it. I was going to tease that for as long as I could, intentionally.
Right.
I did have an answer. I did have a story with the Chaotix that was going to investigate that, but got canceled.
Yep.
I will be covering that in Lost Hedgehog Tales. That is on current and definite hiatus because I don't know when I can get to do it. We've been through this. La-di-da-di-da-di-da.
Insert standard disclaimer about Lost Hedgehog Tales here. Next question comes from Liam B. What motivated your decision to work tragedy into the storyline so frequently? Do you have any general philosophies about mixing tragedy and happy endings in art, as you always did in the comic?
Well, it's part of just what makes the narrative engaging. If everything is happy, hunky-dory, it doesn't really make for a compelling, I've got to pick up this issue next month kind of thing. There are stories out there that are mostly positive, gentle stuff, and it works for them, and their readers enjoy it, and more power to them. That's not the kind of story that I am interested in, and it's not what moves books month to month. It's really just basic formulas. You have to shake things up every now and again. There has to be some tragedy so that our heroes have adversity to overcome. But if it's nothing but bad turn after bad turn, it becomes tiresome. You run out of sympathy, you run out of interest, so you have to keep some levity to it all. There are some really funny gags in Hamlet, and that's a story where pretty much everyone dies at the end. So,
well,
you just got to find that balance,
It's Shakespeare. Of course everyone dies at the end. All right.
Not all the time.
Okay.
Much Ado About Nothing, I don't think has a single on-stage death.
I know. I'm just being pedantic and silly.
You
and not very well versed in Shakespeare. All right, next question comes from Corey Maru. There was one thing I wish to see in the Archie Sonic comics before its cancellation, and that was a one-shot comic of your take on the Fighting Viper storyline in Sonic's universe. Would it be possible in the near future?
Just to be clear, there was no plan for that sort of thing to happen in the old run.
Right. They're just saying they wished to see that at some point.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
Just so somebody doesn't hear the question and go, wait, there was another canceled story? No, it was, Honey, when we introduced her, we didn't run into any interference that I can remember. And then Diana Skelly put in more Fighting Viper references, which were amazing.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were, officially approved. I think they just she put them in there with that nod and wink sort of thing. The current book is much more tightly monitored and approved. And thus far, Sega has not been as keen to allow cross-platform acknowledgments. There are exceptions here and there. The fantastic Halloween Diana Skelly cover, for instance. But for right now, any nods to non-Sonic material in the Sonic book probably aren't going to happen unless I get really sneaky with the dialogue.
All right, next one comes from Chameleon Guy 23. Will a Shadow Chow that accompanies Shadow in Sonic Channel wallpapers and in that Funko Pop appear someday in the comic?
I really hope so. I really do. That is fantastic. I love that little guy. I want to play with that dynamic so much. Given current directions I've received, I don't see it happening soon, but it is definitely on my agenda to one day bring in, if I can.
All right. This next question comes from Devikun 1.0. This one is a little bit long, so I'm going to kind of parse it down to its basic components here and just at one part of it. Regarding your fan comic, kind of where you ended up kind of getting your start-ish, Ian, Sonic Other M.
Yeah.
Devikun wants to know if any artist out there were to express interest in doing pencils and whatnot for the conclusion, would you consider perhaps letting them take on the role of finishing the series?
A little bit of background first, since I see all of Devin Kuhn's question here. Part of what happened with Other M is that when I became professional, I thought it'd be better to distance myself from fan works like that, especially fan works that are so atonal to the franchise they're associated with. And part of the reason why Other M worked is that it hit this magic point, which I call the Sonic fan renaissance, where a lot of the internet was still new. You had a generation of hungry and creative new artists all discovering each other and all creating for the sake of creation. The only reason why Other M was prolific as it was because I was helped out by an incredible number of artists who did a Herculean amount of work. I know that the credit for that was somewhat lost when the comics were backed up. I have reached out to the folks who still host the book, and they've said that they have applied the credits. I haven't checked in a bit. Some of it's been lost to time, which I'm ashamed to say, but I did what I could to research who did what and give credit where it was due. But about the time I moved on was about the time we all grew up, and we had to get real jobs, and we realized that you had to spend time doing stuff that furthered your actual career than just do fan art for the sake of fan art. Doing it on occasion is fun. That's great. That's fine. But doing it like a dedicated job just isn't practical. So by the time I was moving on, so were most of the other fan artists, and those who had signed up to continue the series eventually bailed. So there is no, finished work beyond what I did. That being said, Other M needs to die. It needs to fade into obscurity. I'm not happy that it is still on display. I don't know. I've got this love-hate relationship with it because on the one hand, it's really bad. I mean, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad everyone who did read it and enjoyed it did. I'm very happy for that. But, you can tell that was young Ian full of adolescent angst and thinking he was a big-time storyteller. Ooh, no, it's bad. It's cringe-inducingly bad, especially the first few pages of issue 1, because I drew those, and I colored those in what looks like MS Paint or perhaps badly photo-scanned colored pencil. It's like finding an old home video of you in like grade school dancing without abandon, and it's like, if I could only be that oblivious to the world anymore. But at the same time, I got to work with a ton of very talented and very generous artists. It got translated into like 2 or 3 different languages, and in a period where everybody was trying to put out a fan comic, they would usually get to 1 issue and then fall off the face of the earth. Other M went for 30 of varying page lengths. So in terms of a fan project, it was an impressive creation. In terms of looking back at where I've come from, those were rough days. Rough stuff. I guess maybe there's some nuggets in there. Maybe there's some redeeming ideas, structure possibly, but it's bad. Other M is very bad. If you have not read it, please do me a favor and don't. It's nothing on the internet is hidden forever. I realize that, but just no. Other M is done. It's dead. It's in the ground. Pass by the grave and remember it fondly if you must. But let's move on.
And then Metroid had to go and co-opt the subtitle. How dare they?
Insult to injury.
How dare they? For a game
Nothing
that's
good
for a game
come from that title.
For a game that's not well received, even though I kind of actually don't hate it.
Unless I were to revive it in this kind of satirical sense and just have Sonic running around going, baby, 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 baby.
No, don't do that, please. Don't do that.
Well, what I will do, Kyle, is ask you a question.
Oh, no. Now what?
This one comes from TBF. Kyle, why did you or what inspired you to do podcasting and broadcasting, and what do you enjoy about it?
Man, this is a kind of I don't want to say a loaded question. There's just a surprising amount to it once I sat and thought about it for a while. So, in the 90s, I listened to a lot of radio. Over the air, standard local radio. And I always sort of had this desire in my mind to do kind of something like that. I used to sit and I had a tape recorder, and sometimes I'd sit and sort of record my own radio shows. And they're terrible. They were terrible. They're like Other M, but they're not online, so I'm safe. But but they were bad. Like, I'm almost embarrassed to say, like, what I called the station. That's how bad it was. Because I had a little, a whole station in my mind, like this whole thing that existed. And, but I'm embarrassed to say what it was called because it's just terrible. It's not even clever, Ian. It's just not. It's not even clever.
Well, you've teased this much, and I've had to talk about other M.
Do
What did you call
it? Do I have to?
You've belabored the point. You have to say it now.
Okay, fine. The little station I made up was called KFRT.
Kyle.
I was like, what, 11? I don't know how old I was. I was a kid. I called it KFRT, the fart. And it was terrible. It was awful. I'm glad I don't have any recordings of it on the internet. It's embarrassing. But anyway, so I kind of was inspired by like local talk radio. And then I started listening to streaming radio on the internet. A lot of stuff, this is around like 2002, 2003. A lot of radio streams that I listened to were video game music related, of course. And it was through a post on the Overclocked Remix forums that I discovered a show called Super Radio X, which was a show that was streamed online, but it was also done in a legitimate studio, but it was done at a college station in Maine, in Lewiston, Maine, Emory. And they did about 30 episodes, and it was this big crew of people who just sat and talked about video games and other general silliness, and they played video game music and game music remixes. And that was sort of the impetus to inspire me to get into doing a sort of similar show. But of course, I didn't have a big crew of people to come with me to do it. So I just ended up doing it by myself. And that's where Nitro Game Injection came in. I sort of started NGI with the help of another listener and an archivist who pretty much records any and every video game music related podcast or radio show he can get his hands on, Species 8472. He helped me like get a hang of how to do live streaming, which in 2003 was a bit of a different beast than it is now, even though actually I still do it almost the same way. At least the audio side of it. Video now is a lot more common, so I also do video streams, but back then it was just audio, and you had to kind of self-host or pay for really expensive hosting, so I kind of self-hosted and could only handle maybe 10, 12 people connecting to my server, which was my computer at home, while also doing the show, so I couldn't handle many listeners, and the show sounded like it was being played through a crappy telephone. But people listened to it, and they enjoyed it, and I kept doing it, and I've kept doing it pretty much ever since. And so, and then you asked me to about doing a show, Ian, and next thing we knew, we pretty much decided, yeah, we're going to do a show together, of course. Why would I say no?
You're missing a step, though.
What's that?
Because you and Aleah were friends first.
Correct.
And you coordinated to do that album of Tales of Fantasia and Tales of Symphonia over on OCR.
Right. That was 2005.
And through that, I kind of got introduced to who you were and what kind of a workhorse you were. And that's pretty much how I got introduced to Nitro Game Injection, is through Aleah and your collaboration. And when I saw all of what you had done, I thought to myself, well, I've been kind of thinking of doing a podcast. Aleah can vouch for this guy. He clearly knows what he's doing.
Little did you know.
And that's how the BumbleKast came together. So this episode itself is kind of a culmination of all that is the three of us.
Right. I'm glad I have you fooled that you think I know what I'm doing.
For 101 episodes, Kyle!
I'm glad. So yeah, that's essentially the story of how I got into podcasting and broadcasting. As far as what I enjoy about it, to be honest, the talking part is probably the thing I enjoy the least about it. I mean, I love talking with Ian. Don't get me wrong. I could talk to this guy all day, and we have. But I think that personally, I enjoy more of the behind the scenes work. I like basically being involved in the machinations that actually get the show out there. I quite enjoy doing editing, actually, which is, I know, rare for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like editing, but I actually like it and find it kind of somewhat relaxing, even though I have to listen to myself, which I don't really care for, but I've gotten used to it. So I just like working behind the scenes. I've always kind of enjoyed that because when I was in high school, even, like, I was doing behind the scenes work for drama club productions, and I always preferred doing the behind the scenes stuff. I did eventually get on stage at one point, which was pretty fun, but I definitely preferred to be kind of in the background and be one of the people who helped the production happen rather than being the one who's in the production, if you know what I mean. So things like that, where I just like being involved in the machinations of it all rather than being front and center. I think that's what I enjoy the most. Technical difficulties are kind of a pain, though.
Yeah, but they add the spice to life.
Yeah, and they give us funny content.
Well, that's going to wrap us up for this extra long edition of the BumbleKast. But before we go, we need to give a big thank you to everyone who makes this show possible. So, thank you to Daniel H., Eric F., Connell T., Alex B., Justin S., Andrew D., Blue Title Gamer, Koopling Crew 128, Frederick, ScruffyMatt, Saturn Flicky, Chris A., John B., Jennifer R., Reverend the Late, Lisa M., PC the Unicorn, Do As Diz Din, Dave M., Daniel B., Mike B., Samuel B., Sam Cybercat, DigammaFWau, Brody M., Neil H., Justin G., Dan M.S., Silly String, Tucaro, Lee H.K., Chevelle, Don B., Sin Fritz, John M., James K., Adam B.T., and Overthinking Films.
Thank you, everybody, for supporting us, and thank you, everybody who listened this far. If you, in fact, did listen this far, which you should have. You should have. Where can the people find more about you, Ian, and the things that are going on?
Head over to my website, bumbleking.com, that has a release schedule of all the stuff that I'm writing. There will be an announcement of something that I've been working on and been sitting on for a while now, about the second week of October. Looking very much to announcing that, so look forward to that surprise. You can also follow me on Twitter at IanFlynnBKC. Kyle, where can the people find you?
I am fine feeple. Feeple. I don't know what that is. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter at KyleJCRB. You can also head on over to kngi.org, the home of Nitro Game Injection, which is my other show that streams live at Saturdays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to tune in for that and check out some awesome video game music, generally stuff made by fans, remixes, arrangements, covers, all that fun stuff, head on over there and check it out. And you can also listen to old episodes of that, and you can find old episodes of the BumbleKast over there too. You can find them all in MP3 format, ready to go for your podcasting device of choice.
Keep up with the news over at BumbleKast on Twitter, and contact us at BumbleKast@yahoo.com. Patrons, you can always message us over at patreon.com/BumbleKast. We
also have BumbleKast Gaming live streams available for everyone to watch Sundays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, roughly thereabouts, on our YouTube channel. So keep an eye out on YouTube and on Twitter for that happening. It also can happen at random points whenever we get around to it.
You can help support us by heading over to the Bumble Store. That's shop.spreadshirt.com/Bumble Store, and deck yourself out with all sorts of stuff with our faces, with the BumbleKast logo. And that's about it, really. But that's all we have. That's all we are. It is our identity put onto merchandise for you. Buy us, wear us, be us.
That's a little too strong. It's a little weird. It's a little weird, Ian.
Okay, I'll back it off next time. Sorry.
All right. Are we ready to close out this monster episode?
We are. Thank you again to Aleah Baker for joining us and sharing so much of her insight into both her own life and into her creations for the Archie Sonic comic. Thank you all for your patience as we finally got around to it. And thank you all for listening. We will see you in a couple weeks for episode 102. Have a good night, everybody.
See you later.
I'm glad you enjoy editing, because have fun with this one.
3 hours. It's fine.
It's fine.
Is she sorry? Did she say she's sorry?
Yeah, she's saying she's sorry.
Ah! Stop!
Shut up. That wasn't directed at you. That was directed at my loving husband. Anyway,
Yeah, Ian, shut up.
yeah, Ian, shut up. Okay. So, okay, first off,
Scruffy, shut up.
Okay, I got the headphones to
Whoa! Hey, whoa! We got double Ian. All the way across the sky. Whoa, my God, so intense. I think you're both like sharing a mic, so you're probably not pushed up against it like you normally would be. So,
yeah, we're fighting over it.
Yeah, well, I expect a fight to the death.
To the desk? We don't have a desk.
Fight.
You see in smaller places.
Fight to the death and the desk. Whatever comes first.
We'll see how the night plays out.
Okay. You're gonna let me solo it? Oh boy, here we go.
Well, you asked the questions anyway.
You can shove me out of the way to mansplain and correct where I'm wrong.
That's yeah.
Here, this show has already been kind of long. Let's not push it.
That sounds like Ian, all right. That's totally something he would do. I know that guy.
Okay.
I'm recording all of this, by the way.
I know, I figured.
Okay, good. This is going in at the end of the show. All of it. All 20 minutes. You've been listening to the BumbleKast, a co-production of Bumbleking Comics and the KNGI Network. Original theme music composed by Ken Coda Snyder. Remixed intro by T-Lopes. Find out more information, along with podcast feeder links, MP3 downloads, and more at bumbleking.com and kngi.org. I haven't had to edit out any farts yet, but there's always the chance.
Well, we still gained subscribers, so you're doing something right.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Leaving now.
BumbleKast.
You're not going very far. It's fine.
In 3, 2, 1. In 3, 2. Hush.
Okay, I'm serious
Hush.
too.
You're ruining my intro. Quiet. Stop laughing. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. You're not stopping it. You're only making it worse. Stop it.
It hasn't even started yet, and this is already the best episode ever.